everyone. My name's Berit Weymers. I hope you can hear me okay. Today's webinar is on Form Building 102, the building blocks of smart controls. If this is your first time attending one of our webinars, we do record the sessions, and in the next few days, you'll receive the recording of today's session, as well as all the materials that go with it. Usually during these webinars, I do have a host. Today we were unable to do that, so when you have questions, I'll be trying to check during different times of the webinar, so just bear with me as we go through it. So I'm really excited for today's topic. This builds off of the webinar we had earlier this summer. We did Form Building 101, which was just about getting started with building forms. So today the goal is to inform you on how to build these smarter forms and actually do a little demo at the end. So as far as our agenda, we're going to start with what are smart controls and how to use them. We'll talk through the iFormBuilder built-in functions. This list just keeps growing. We'll then go into our element dynamic attributes and reference IDs, and then the form dynamic attributes and reference IDs, and then a demo where we are applying some of the things that we've talked about and putting it into a form. That form that we build today, I will share with you after today's session so that you'll have access to it later on. All right, just bear with me here. Okay, so let's start with what are smart controls and how to use them. So smart controls are a way to build these smarter forms. So you're adding logic to create custom forms and eliminate human error and user interaction. Some ways to build smarter forms are to limit the characters through the data size attribute, and I'll show that how to do that in just a little bit. You can also use one of our latest elements, which is the HTTP request element. You are required to have online access to be able to implement that, but what you're able to do with that element is you're actually able to call to a public API to populate information in your form. So it is a live call that happens from your device to the web and then back down to your device, and that's why it is online required. We had a webinar a few months ago about that, and so if you do have more questions, I'd be happy to send you that link about accessing that webinar and all the resources. Smarter forms also make use of smart controls. That's what we'll be focusing on today, but they can also make use of the page-level JavaScript. So if you are familiar with writing JavaScript, that page-level JavaScript allows you to write variables and call to those variables within your form. Smarter forms may also make use of the location element smart controls so that you can parse out those location details so that you can connect to a GIS or geospatial software with the correct formula, essentially, of how you need the location information to be displayed. So maybe you need it to say latitude, comma, longitude. So you're able to use the location smart controls to populate that information and have it already formatted in a field. Smarter forms also make use of segmented option lists. So we're not going to be talking through segmented option lists today, but we do have help desk articles on how to use them. And essentially what you're able to do is you have multiple option lists, and based off of what is selected from that first option list will change what the user sees in the second or third option list. So you're limiting the amount of viewing and only showing the user what actually applies to them. Smarter forms also make use of our iFormBuilder built-in functions. We'll be talking a little bit more about those in just a little bit. They can make use of the lookup element, so they can call to a local database on the device to pre-populate information. And lastly, these smarter forms make use of either form or element reference IDs or form and element dynamic attributes. And again, we'll be talking through those in just a little bit. So here's a little bit more information on what smart controls are. They can validate elements. They can give meaningful feedback to users so that users understand that either the response that they put in is correct or incorrect. You're able to call to this lookup table so the user doesn't have to put in information in over and over and over again. It just calls to the lookup table, shows them that information, and has it actually displayed in the form itself. You're able to make use of skip logic. So with that, again, you're only showing the user what actually applies to them. You can restrict visibility. So maybe you want to have some data in the feed or the Excel file that you export, and you don't want the user to actually fill out that information or actually see that information in the form. So you can restrict the user's visibility so it's hidden in the form, but you have it in the reporting. And lastly, you're able to default form values. So we have a date, time element. Maybe you don't want the user to actually have to go in and select the information. You could just default it to today's date. That way it's a little bit of a faster and easier experience for the end user. A little bit more information about these smart controls. So these smart controls are created using JavaScript statements. If you're unfamiliar with JavaScript, that's okay. We have a lot of resources on how to use it, and there's also so many resources online. One resource that I go to a lot is called W3 Schools, and they teach you how to actually write some of these JavaScript statements. Smart controls make use of the element names, or what we oftentimes refer to as the element data column names. And they may also refer to the parent form name. So these smart control statements aren't going to have capital letters in them unless you're looking at an iFormBuilder built-in function. You're going to look at the name, which is going to be all lowercase and have the underscore. So this is what we refer to as the name or the data column name. Each smart control has its own purpose. So when we look at our smart controls in the form builder, I'm going to scroll down here, we have dynamic value, condition value, dynamic label, client validation, and validation message. Each of these have their own purpose and their own reason to be used. Because of this, you won't use the same sort of statement in the smart controls. So as we go on, I'll be showing you when you'll use the dynamic value versus condition value and what each one of these mean. So let's start with that dynamic value. So a lot of times we use the dynamic value if we're going to do any sort of calculation or default elements to a certain value. So let's say you are basically trying to use that time element and default it to the time that the user starts the record. So you'll use dynamic value for that. The next one is the condition value. This one is all about the view. So this is what you'll use for the skip logic, and also if you're trying to hide an element from view from the user on their device, but you wanted to capture the data in the back end. In our tip and trick section here, you could see that you'd place false in the condition value to hide the element from view, and then this ZC display key, which we'll talk about in just a little bit, to call to the option list smart controls to only show an element based off of a selection made in an option list. Next is our dynamic label. The dynamic label is really cool in how it can be used. You're able to actually take a response from what the user has placed in a different element and use it in a follow-up question. For example, I have used the Manatee Works element to scan a barcode, and I have a text element underneath the Manatee Works that will display the barcode result to the user. Underneath that barcode result, I'll then have another select option list where I'm asking the user, is this barcode correct? So it actually displays the barcode result in the label of the select element so the user can kind of confirm that yes, this is correct, or no, it's not. And then if they select no, they have to go back and rescan that barcode. So the dynamic label can be really helpful. And I will say, I think it is underutilized. So definitely think about how you can use it a little bit more and how to make it a part of your process. One thing I will say about the dynamic label is the label does not change when you're looking at the data exports. It's only in the form that you're going to see that change. The next two are client validation and validation message. These two go together. The first is client validation. This is where you're going to make use of a JavaScript statement so that you can configure it so that a user cannot submit a record if that validation has not been met. So for instance, you can create a statement that says this element has to be greater than 0. If it's not, then the user cannot submit the record. So the first part, this client validation, is where you put the smart control statement and the JavaScript statement. This second part, validation message, is where you actually write out the text that's going to display to the user when they try to submit the record. So here's a quick example. There's a number field and it's capturing the speed. So in this case, we say speed has to be greater than 0. This is our JavaScript statement. Then our validation message in quotes will say the speed must be greater than 0. The user isn't going to see this until they hit the done or submit button in their form. So at that point, when they try to submit the record to the cloud, they're not going to be able to if it's not greater than 0. Next, I wanted to briefly touch upon one of our new smart control best practices in clearing caching. So caching means that a response is being stored essentially on the device and being shown to the user, and maybe it's from the previous record that was used. So I have these slides in here and I talk a little bit about it. I'm not going to go through it too much right now, but I did want to make you aware of it. I have the help desk article in here, and I also have some examples in here as well in a form package. Before I go on, are there any questions? All right, I'm just looking here. It looks like there are some questions, but I already answered them, so I'm glad I was able to do that for you. So I will continue and we'll go through our iFormBuilder built-in functions. So hopefully you can see my device here on the left-hand side. I have a template called built-in functions form template. And from this, all my projects are going to copy this form and then use it on all my forms so that they all start the same. Now what I want to do here is I want to actually show you what that looks like, because later on in our demo we are going to go through the process of copying this form, hiding the elements from view, but still capturing the data in the back end. So let me open up this form. So here you can see it's a sample of most of the iFormBuilder built-in functions. All of these are populating information based off of the list that we have of built-in functions that I have here. And I also have a form package that you can copy and import into your account later on. These built-in functions, the first ones that we have here, username, first name, last name, and email. These are all coming from the information about the user that's captured in user management. So when you create a new user, you have to create their username, first name, last name, email in user management, and then it's displayed here. Now the rest of these, starting from the OS type all the way down to the form label, these are really helpful for when it comes to troubleshooting the form or integrating with other systems. So you're able to pre-populate this information. As I scroll down, we have a built-in function called getNextSequence. And here we have it. It allows the user to keep track of how many records they have provided. So right now this appears blank, and I would hide this from the user's view. What would happen is once I sync the record to the cloud, it's going to start this count. So we'll start with 0, then it goes 1, 2, so on. So that allows you to capture and see how many records they've submitted for a particular form. Keep in mind, if you do a clean local database, it'll actually start back at 0 again. As I go down, I have a question that says auto-populate the location. And so this actually fills in the location element by making a selection here. If I didn't want them to auto-populate, then I would just keep it hidden. And I'm actually capturing this information using some of our iFormBuilder built-in functions. As I scroll down, you'll see that we have some location time, so when the user actually captured that location. And lastly, you can get a string result into a text element for that location so that you are pre-populating all this information. Now, as I mentioned, I would have all my forms either starting with all of these or some of these, and then I would hide them from the user's view so that they can't edit them, but I'm still capturing this data and making it so that all of my forms start exactly the same. If you can see up here, I do say that this is using most of the iFormBuilder built-in functions. It does not include the subform aggregation, math, or sum. So just to show you what that looks like, here is an example where you could have a subform attached to a parent form, and you could aggregate the sum of all the results or the average of all the results from the subform that was attached. In just a little bit, I will walk you through how to attach a subform, and in that subform, we are doing a calculation. And so if we have time, I'll walk you through how to add iFormBuilder.math.sum to your form. And the last iFormBuilder built-in function that I want to talk about today is our option list built-in functions. So we have two built-in functions for our option list. We have ZCDisplayKey and we have ZCDisplayValue. The Zerion team created these so that you could call to the key value or the label of an option list and have it displayed in an additional field, or create your statement to call to the key value or label. The reason we did this is we found that a lot of our users were actually making use of calling to the sort order, which is the order that the option appears on the list. And so then if they change the order, then that smart control statement broke. So this is why we actually recommend using ZCDisplayKey. This way you can change the label and the order of the option list. As long as the key value stays the same, your smart control statement will stay the same and continue working. So I'm going to pause here before I go into the element dynamic attributes and reference IDs. I did see that there were some questions coming in. One question was, where did I say that you could get JavaScript help? W3 Schools is a great resource. I have a link to it in this presentation. I also can share it with you via an email after the fact. There's also tools like JS Fiddle, which allow you to put in your JavaScript statement and actually test that statement. So it'll tell you if you're missing a comma or a parenthesis, and it just helps you understand your formatting and making sure it works correctly. A lot of times I will use that before bringing it over to iFormBuilder because then I feel more confident that it will work. And great question. If there are more questions, again, keep them coming at any time. I will answer them when I can. So next, we're going to go through these element dynamic attributes and reference IDs. So I'm going to show you where these are located within our forms, and then I'll talk through these, and later on in our demo, we're going to actually add some of these. So in this example here, I have just number elements and a read only. Now, if I scroll up into our element property section, we see dynamic attributes. Now, there are no dynamic attributes for the elements that I have added in here. I have to have one of the elements listed on this list to actually see these dynamic attributes take place. So dynamic attributes allow you to customize the behavior of an element so that it meets your end goal or meets your needs. The elements that currently make use of the dynamic attributes are the multi-photo element, our HTTP request element, the lookup element, time element, and date and time element. So you can see here on our screenshots, we have a date and time element selected, and the dynamic attribute that appears is you're allowing the user to choose and override the device settings for how the hour appears. So if you want it in a 12-hour time or 24-hour time. I think this has been extremely helpful to a lot of groups, and it's an easy way to create a smarter form. Our next dynamic attribute is with the multi-photo. So the multi-photo allows you to take multiple photos quickly and have them stored in all one element. The dynamic attributes that we will see with the multi-photo are the ability to force the camera to be used. We can also force the library to be used. And lastly, you can define how many photos are being captured in the multi-photo. The default is 6. We don't allow more than that at this time. But if you do think that you would want more for your project, just let your customer success manager know, and they'll be able to help you with that. Just another note here about the multi-photo is it does store the data as a JSON object. So if you're not familiar with what that looks like, definitely test out using the multi-photo element and then look at the data and make sure that you understand how it's been created. In just a little bit, when we do our demo, we are going to add the multi-photo element to our form, so you'll be able to see how it appears. We also have dynamic attributes for the lookup element. And so here's an example, or here's all the details for the dynamic attributes for the lookup element, where you're able to sort, filter, read only, and max. Now there's a lot of content in here. I'm not going to go through this right now. This is more as a resource for you to check out later on and read through and have as the links if you want to learn more on how to use the lookup element. Next, we have element reference IDs. So if I jump back to my form here, we have this section for our reference IDs. Now, dynamic attributes were actually created because reference IDs force you to type out what the reference ID is, and we found that that was just causing too many issues or just it was too difficult. And so that's where dynamic attributes came into play, but we still have these reference IDs available to be used within your form. Again, reference IDs are like dynamic attributes where you're customizing how the element functions whether it's in the reporting side or in the data collection side. So you can see here on the reporting side, you're basically able to define when an element is displayed to a user on either a PDF or an email, or maybe it's not displayed to a user at all. Then when we go down to our element reference IDs, this first one's for subforms, where you're able to basically set up a subform so that it keeps opening brand new records for the user to capture the data faster. Just like we had with the multi-photo element where you're able to disable the photo library or the camera, you can do that for the image element or the drawing element. You would just have to use one of these reference IDs. For the counter element, you can actually define the step value, so how much the counter element will increment by within the form. This disable list, this is making use of smart table search. A lot of times we actually push people to use the lookup element instead of smart table search, but if you are a group that is using smart table search and you do want to disable the list, then this is how you would do it. And the last reference ID that we have here is for our location element. So when you go into the location element and you hit refresh, you're able to have the point go to where you're located. Now, if you want to have it change location, maybe you have it a few feet away, then with location change enabled, you're able to make the selection on the map by holding down on that point. So this is one that can be extremely helpful when you're looking at location data. So these are all element reference IDs and element dynamic attributes. We also have the form level. So this is sometimes called form or page. These are located in the advanced section of your form properties. So here's an overview of what they are, but I'm going to show you where it's located when you're in your form builder. So within your form builder, we have these little tools over here that if you click edit properties of a form, you can go to the advanced properties. And this is where we see dynamic attributes, and we also have our reference IDs. So I'm going to jump back here. So the dynamic attributes allow you to change the form functionality in the app. And I'll show you a little table that talks through what the different attributes can do. Reference ID 1 through 5, they also allow you to add customizations for a specific form. So how a form is submitted, or the color scheme that you have around the form in the form home screen, that's all done within reference IDs. The label icons URL, this allows you to add images to like the image label, and you just need to add the form path to point to the directory where those images are stored. And lastly, if you ever want to disable a form, this is done in not the form properties, but actually in the basic at the bottom, you have the ability to disable a form. What that means is it's no longer going to be available in the form home screen, but it will be available if you filter out and choose to see the disabled forms from the list. Additionally, if you do disable a form, you won't see it in form assignment. So it helps you keep your environment a little bit cleaner. So here are dynamic attributes for our forms. So the first one that we see is this ability to disable or the delete records button on the device. What that is referencing here is if I jump over to my device here, we have this little trash can at the bottom. If you do not want that trash can displayed to the user, then you're going to select this dynamic attribute from the drop-down list. If you are assigning records to users, enabling this option will update the assigned or completed records if the same record has been reassigned. So this is really helpful in the sense that it constantly updates, and the user can keep the record on their device and still be able to edit it. If you don't have this selected, if you assign a record back down to a user, they won't be able to make any changes to it. The next two are focused on if you're looking at the mapping on the map view on the device. So just to again show you what that looks like, we have this little map icon at the bottom of the right-hand screen, and by default it is showing me where I'm located right now. And if I want to choose how the location priority is configured in the map, then I use this dynamic attribute. Now I'm not going to go through all of these reference IDs because I do want us to actually go down into the demo portion, but I want to make sure that you are aware that there are 5 different reference IDs, and each of them have their own purpose, and each of them will make use of whatever has been described on these pages. Keep in mind you have to make sure you're using all uppercase letters and underscores if you're going to make use of any of the reference IDs. In our demo, we are going to make use of this display field reference ID. This is where you're able to customize the table and how it's being displayed within the form itself. If we look at our device here on the left-hand side, you'll notice that I see the top 3 elements from my form. And so this first one is a label, and it's not actually capturing any data, so that might not be very helpful to have in this table, and that's why I would make use of the display field. Sort field can also be used, so you're sorting how the records are being displayed within that table. And I'm going to skip ahead here. We do have reference ID 4, which is going to override the device settings for deleting on upload or not deleting on upload. This can be really helpful if you have sensitive data and you're worried about the settings that a user might have within the iForm app. You would just go ahead and put record delete on upload, so it overrides what the device is set to, and you're able to make sure that no records are being saved on the device after they've been synced to the cloud. And then the last property that we have is for reference ID 5, and this is where you're able to customize the color that you see within the form itself on this iForm home screen. So you're able to customize the info button, the text color, the icon colors that you have in here. You're able to do these customizations for each form. And I'm going to talk through what we're actually going to build out in our demo today, and then we'll go step by step through the process. So during the demo, we're going to practice the following, or I'll be doing these steps, and then hopefully you can perform these tasks later on or whenever you're ready. So I'm going to start by copying a form template. And again, if you want to do these steps in your own iFormBuilder account as we go through it, that's fine with me too. So I'm going to copy the form template. The form template I'm going to copy today is our built-in functions. I'm going to place false in the condition value to hide these built-in functions from view, but know that they're still capturing data in the back end. I'm going to go in and add a multi-photo element and configure their dynamic attributes. I'm also going to add an option list, and within that option list, one of the options is going to be other. I'm going to have a text element appear if the user selects other from the list, and then I'm going to use the smart control statement ZC display key to have that other text element appear. I'm going to use reference ID 2 to update that display field. So I'm updating that table to only show what's helpful. I will connect a subform to the parent form where I have number elements, and I've limited the characters, as well as I've made use of this new functionality that we have for self parent top, which is something that I had talked briefly about earlier, and I have a link to in our slides. And those are going to be used to clear the number results. And then again, if we have time, I am going to add some of the built-in functions for the iFormBuilder.math.sum. If at any point you have questions as I'm going through this, please let me know. So let's do that first step. The first step we're going to do is we're going to copy our template. So let me just refresh here, make sure I'm still logged in. And I'm not, so hold on one second. Okay, so if you're brand new to building forms and you're looking at this table, we have these action icons located here on our right-hand side. So the one we're going to do right now is we're going to create a copy of the form. Now, if I didn't want to create a copy and I just wanted to open the form, I click on that row and that would launch the form. Once you create a copy, one of our best practices is go right away into the edit properties and update the name. That way it is for your particular form and it is following the naming conventions that we strongly suggest that you have. So edit properties. For this one, I'm going to call it Building Blocks Webinar 2023. And I'm going to have this based on label just for a second, and then I'm going to uncheck the box that says based on label, do _P. If you attended our first session, we said always follow the best practice on this parent-child relationship. So top level is this first form that the user has access to, and the child form is any subforms that are attached. Then we have this description field. This is what is shown if you tap the info button for a particular form. You can upload icons. I uploaded one earlier and they're just blocks, so I'm going to go ahead and use that. And then click where it says Save Changes. Now, as I mentioned before, one of the first steps I want to do is actually hide some of these fields from the user's view so that it's not capturing, or so that the user isn't able to edit that information. One of the first things I'm going to do here is actually disable this label or delete this label because I don't need it. This is just designed as a template to have you learn a little bit more about these built-in functions. So I am going to delete it. Whenever you have to delete an element, we try to make it as hard as possible because we want to make sure you understand that you could be deleting any data. Now, quick pop quiz here. Go ahead and go into the question area or the chat if you remember what we said that we'll use if we want to hide an element from view, but not hide it in the data. So just hide it from the user's view on their device. Let's see who was paying attention earlier. All right. Great. I did see one response come in, and we are going to use the condition value smart control. Yes. And what we're going to do is we're going to place false with all lowercase letters into that condition value. So thank you for working with me here on this one. Okay, so we're going down here and placing false. Now, as you can see in the dynamic value, this is the built-in functions that we went through earlier in the slides. So one thing that we can do to make our life a little bit easier is right now we're in what's called the device view when we look at our form builder, and we have to go one element at a time to place false in the condition value. We can also go in the table view. We still have to go one element at a time, but it's a little bit easier to see it in here. And so now I just can hit enter. Oops, made a mistake there. Hold on, don't hit enter. Just go to the next line. Let me delete element, delete. All right, bear with me here. Okay, so place my false. You'll notice as we do this, we do see yellow. So yellow means that it hasn't been saved yet. But you can see how this is a lot faster than when we're in the device view. We have to jump down to the element on the right-hand side. So it just kind of feels like fewer clicks. Now, if we're hiding this question, then this is also being hidden. So we don't have to put false in that condition value. But this is an example of using that ZC display key, calling to an option list and saying, if this option list value is yes, then show this element. If it's no, then keep it hidden. So I'm just going to finish up here. And now what's really cool is that once this is done and we have this saved, the user isn't going to see any of this, but we have 30 elements that are just going to be capturing this data for us, and we'll have it in the back end. So I was able to do this from the list view, as I mentioned, which to me, again, feels a little bit faster, but if you like the device view, you can easily jump back to that by clicking the icon in the left-hand corner. Any questions before we go on to our next step? Okay, so when we look at our steps, we copied the form template. We placed false in the condition value to hide the built-in functions from the user's view, but it's still capturing the data. The next thing we have on our list to do is add the multi-photo element and configure it to show our dynamic attributes. So at the bottom here, we're going to select the element right here, the last one that we have, and then on the left-hand side, select the multi-photo element. So we can say take photos of the house. So let's pretend we're doing some sort of house inspection. Now, if you're brand new to form building, one thing you always want to keep in mind is the label is what the user sees on the device. This name, often referred to as the data column name, is what we see in our feeds. It's also what we use in our smart controls. As I scroll down here, you'll see now we have the dynamic attributes, and we can go in and assign one or more attribute. So the first one is the limit. So let's say we are taking a picture of a house, and most houses only have 4 sides. So we can come in here and limit the amount of photos to 4. We can also make sure that the user is taking brand new photos. So we're going to disable access to the photo library. And again, by disabling access to the photo library, we're able to make sure that the user is taking brand new photos. I did just see a question come in, so hold on, please. Okay, so there was a question going back to where we put the false in the condition value, what's actually being hidden. And I'll show you that as we open up our parent form that we just built. Okay, so let me save this form. So save it here. And then on the left-hand side, I am going to sync my device. And at that point, you'll see that all of the smart controls that we have listed here are hidden from view, and we only are going to be able to see the multi-photo element. Okay, so I open up my form that we just copied the template for. We have take photos of the house. You'll see it just says 0 out of 4. So I'm going to open up this element. And at the bottom, you'll see I only have the camera option. If I allow the user to also take photos from the library, there would be a library icon located at the bottom part as well. So let's go ahead. I'm going to take some quick photos. I do it so quickly with this multi-photo, you have no idea that I did that. And then I can even add captions. So I can say this is the north side of the house, south side, east side, and west side, all within those caption sections of the multi-photo element. So it's really, really helpful. If you notice that some of these photos are blurry or you need to retake them, you just make a selection and then you have the delete icon in the bottom. Today I'll keep all 4 of those in. So that's the dynamic attributes with the multi-photo. Again, we have a list of elements that you can use the dynamic attributes for. The next thing I want us to do is I want us to add an option list. In that option list, we're going to have other as one of the text elements, and then we'll use the built-in function ZCDisplayKey to have the other element appear only if the user makes that selection. So I'm going to jump over to the form that we're working on here. If you are brand new to building forms, we do have something called a divider, where you're able just to basically break up the section of the form and allow just a straight line to go through. So after my multi-photo element, I'll put a divider, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add one of our option list elements, which we have the select element, a pick list, and a multi-select. I'm going to add the pick list today. And for this, I'll ask the user to select the house type. So we're going with that example that we are doing a house inspection. We have a few different ways that you can add option lists. If you've already have your option list built out, you can actually upload it by going to this option list section in the menu located right next to the forms button. So this is our option list home screen, and we allow you to upload CSV files as well as raw files or raw text to upload and create those option lists. Today we're going to use what we refer to as the inline option list builder and create our option list from here. So we create a list by, at the bottom, I click this left-hand button that says create list, call it house types. Once I hit the selection is made, I have to select it again from the location on the left, and then I can start typing in the details. So I'll just call this house type 1. Now you'll notice we have sort order, label, and key value. So this key value is what we call to when we use the ZC display key. The label is what we're going to see on the device, and the order is the order of the options on the device. Now I'm going to keep this simple and just add a few more types here and then have other as our last option. We'll do one more, and this will have other. Now again, I'm going to call to this other key value in our smart control statement. So I want to make sure I see if it's all lowercase, if there's any uppercase. It is case sensitive, so I need to make sure I'm aware of that. Hit the check mark and then save this option list. And once you save it and you no longer see that yellow, then you can assign selected. So underneath this pick list element, this is where I'm going to add either a text area or text element so the user can type in what the other house type is. Okay, so next we're going to scroll down and we are going to use the condition value for our statement here because we are talking about when an element is viewable to a user. So just like we used false to hide an element from the user's view, we're going to use the condition value to hide this element unless the user selects other from select house type. So we start by using ZC display key and then underscore. And I'll put this in the chat in case you are following along. You'll notice that we do have, this is called camel case, where there's uppercase and lowercase letters. So you do need to make sure you follow that standard when you type it into your condition value. The next thing we need to do with this statement is call to the data column name of the pick list element. So I have to select the pick list element and scroll all the way to the top where it says select underscore house underscore type. And I'm going to copy that, go back down to my text element, paste that, do equals equals, open quotes, and type in other, all lowercase. So again, what this statement is saying is, please look at this pick list option list, look at the key value, and when you see other in the key value, then show this text element. If you don't see other in the key value, keep it hidden. So I'm going to save my form and I'll show you what it looks like on the device. So I'm going to refresh my device. And while I'm doing that, if there's any questions or if I went too fast, just let me know. Okay, so I have my forms been updated on my device. So I'm going to open up my form here, press the plus button to create a new record. And I have this pick list, select house type. If I go into that list, I select other. Now I have a text element where I can type in that other type. If I had selected house type 3 or any of the other ones, then it would stay hidden. So that's a really easy and quick way to make sure you're gathering more information from your users and also only showing them what actually applies to them. And the last, we have two more fields that we can look at, or two more things that we can look at adding before we run out of time here. Reference ID 2 in the display field. This just allows you to define, again, what is being shown in the table on the device. So this is in our advanced properties. And let's say I want it to show element at the sort order 1 and 30, and that's it. So those two fields. So I'm going to save changes. And if you're wondering, well, where did you get those numbers from? I don't understand. Well, each element has a sort order, and it's located here at the bottom. So in the info section of the element properties. So when I chose 30, that takes the location string. So that's element 30. And then the first one is the first name, iFormBuilder first name. So when I go back and I sync my device, I'll only see 2 elements in, or 2 columns instead of 3 from this view. All right, so the last thing we're going to do here is I'm going to add a subform element, and that's done by selecting subform from our left-hand side here. And I have a form that's already created here. This is a subform where you are counting how many windows are on the sides of the building. So let's say we're going to assume you're capturing data on more than one building, so you have to fill this out multiple times. One thing you'll notice about this subform is all of these number elements. I've cleared out the cache by using self, which is referencing this, saying instead of typing in the form name to show the relationship and clearing out the cached result, you just say self. I also changed the data size to 3, so the user can only put in 3 characters. Again, I'll show you what that looks like on my device in just a minute. Right now, all I want to do is add it to my parent form. I'll just call this one window count. I'm going to scroll down and see where it says the smart paging. I'm going to go into my subform list. And this is actually the correct one that I want. It just so happened to be at the top of my form here. And I'm under link mode, I'm going to set this to multiple so that the user can make multiple submissions. Going to save and then sync my device. Once this is done syncing, I'll show you what that looks like. While it's syncing, just to go through a few announcements. So as of recently, we do have Zerion Academy, which has asynchronous courses that are now available. So those are courses that go through training on all of the different aspects except for the form building. The form building we are going to continue doing webinars on, but the other pieces are in there. If you want to access those courses, I do have the steps on how to do that. And again, that's going to be here in the presentation that we share with you, but also in the follow-up email, we'll give you those steps. Our next webinar is on October 4th, and it's all about our public link forms and how to get started with them and what can be done to customize them to create a really cool experience. And now let me show you how our form appears that we just edited and created. So at the top here, we have a multi-photo element that we can test. Then we have our select house type and our window count into our subforms. So one thing you'll notice about this window count is it does have 5 columns to display all 5 elements from this subform. Now, because we cleared the cache, all these elements are defaulted to 0. I'm going to start putting in some responses here. We have a read-only element at the very bottom, which is actually tallying up the total of windows. So when you look at that, you'll notice that that tally is just using the data column names and doing a normal addition problem with those data column names. And are there any questions before I let you go? I know there's a lot of information here. I know if you were brand new to building forms, this might have been a little overwhelming. My hope is that with the presentation materials, with the steps that we went through, at least you feel like you have a foundation to actually get started. And if you want more information on how to build these forms and how to use these smart controls, feel free to send me an email and I'm happy to help. But I really appreciate everyone's time and effort today. And thank you for all of those who participated and added your own comments and responded to my questions in the chat. So with that, I'll let you guys go. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you very much.